The Federal Reserve is leaving rates unchanged, near zero. The central bank also projects no interest rate increases through 2022. Fed Chair Jerome Powell spoke earlier about the tremendous economic hardship the coronavirus has brought. He also acknowledged which communities have been hit the hardest.
The downturn has not fallen equally on all Americans, and those least able to shoulder the burden have been the most affected. In particular, the rise in joblessness has been especially severe for lower-wage workers, for women, and for African Americans and Hispanics.
U.S. stocks are mixed after the Fed decision. Despite massive unemployment, some U.S. stocks are at record highs. However, that doesn't matter to many African Americans, few of whom own stocks, as the vast majority is owned by white people who went to college. Valerie Wilson is director of the program on race, ethnicity and the economy at the Economic Policy Institute. She joins us live now. Valerie, thank you so much for being with us. I think that one of the statistics that I found the most disheartening is really the fact that prior to the Civil Rights Act, way back before 1968, back in 1962, in fact, white people on average were 7 times richer than black people. Now, 50 years later, that income inequality, that gap, is actually getting wider. What are we doing wrong?
So I think that so often we look at our current situation and assume that it is something recent or something that is an anomaly. And the fact is that racial economic inequality is large and incredibly persistent. Many of the disparities we observe today are larger than they were 50, 60 years ago, or at best the same as they were 50 or 60 years ago.
So then just in terms of coming up with a solution, a lot of people, particularly Democrats, are talking about raising the minimum wage. Obviously, the federal minimum wage right now is stuck at $7.25 an hour. It's been at that level for 10 years. How much would raising the minimum wage to, say, $10 an hour, how much would that do to lift a significant portion of black people out of poverty?
Well, we know that black workers are disproportionately represented among low-wage workers. So any policy to raise the minimum wage, particularly at the federal level, is going to have a disproportionate effect on African American households. But it's also true that there is a racial wage gap at every level of the workforce, not just among low-wage workers. And in fact, among college graduates, we found that the black wage gap has grown the most over the last 45 years.
So what is an accurate way of gauging how well as a society we're doing at tackling income inequality? Because clearly we talk about the stock market a lot, but that's not it, because a lot of black people are not invested in the stock market at all. We talk about GDP numbers, but clearly that's not it. How do we get an accurate sense of how well we're doing in tackling this issue? So
I think there are a number of things that we can look at. One, every month we get new data on employment statistics. And unfortunately, throughout history, the black unemployment rate is typically double the white unemployment rate. I spoke just a few moments ago about racial wage gaps that are persistent. Income disparities. The median black household has about 60% of the income of the median white household. And then wealth is another one that I think is particularly important when we're considering economic vulnerability and one's ability to weather a downturn like we're seeing now. The median black family has just 10% of the wealth of the median white family in this country.
You know, Valerie, some experts have said that it would take at least 2 centuries to close the gap, the economic gap between blacks and whites in this country. I certainly pray that that is not the case. Valerie Wilson, live for us there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.